Darkness blankets the dusty streets of Willow Creek, a frontier town perched on the edge of the unknown. A solitary rancher, weighed down by memories of love and loss, navigates the moonlit path toward a rickety barn on Tay outskirts. Rumor whispers of a mail-order bride who might finally mend his broken heart, but fate holds its own plan. Tonight, secrets will spark beneath the rafters, and a frightened stranger's plea will set off a cascade of life-or-death revelations. Before dawn, alliances will be forged, loyalty tested, and a daring gamble will decide the fate of them all if they can survive. Jackson Carter stood on his porch, the wind carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the lingering heat of a brutal summer day. In his hand was a worn photograph of his late wife Clara, smiling under the shade of an old oak. Jackson remembered every detail of that day, the pastel sky, the warm breeze, how her eyes danced with teenage joy. But that was 3 years ago, before the fever came and took her away. Since then, his ranch had felt as empty as the wide plains that stretched beyond Willow Creek. He had done his best to keep busy fencing new pastures, breaking wild horses, mending broken windows in the dusty old house, but each chore only reminded him he was alone. Folks in town often whispered about him, saying, "He's a decent man, but he's haunted by tragedy." Some felt pity, others felt he should stop grieving and start living again. His sister Evelyn Carter, who lived in nearby Dry Gulch, had been sending him letters for months, encouraging him to find another companion, someone who might share the workload and ease his loneliness. Reluctant at first, Jackson found himself reading mail-order advertisements in the Willow Creek Weekly. It felt strange, shameful almost, to think about replacing Clara. Yet as he read about women out east, seeking a fresh start in the frontier, a flicker of hope stirred in his heart. Late one night, after wrestling with guilt and longing, he penned a letter to a Mrs. Eliza Thompson of Cincinnati, who had placed a discreet advertisement seeking a husband in the Western Territories. He sealed the envelope and sent it on the next stagecoach, uncertain whether he hoped for a reply or dreaded one. Weeks passed with no word, and Jackson resigned himself to the idea that nothing would come of it. He threw himself into the backbreaking work of harvesting hay under the relentless sun. Days stretched into nights, and the lonely routine persisted. But then, on a Thursday afternoon, the stagecoach rumbled into Willow Creek, bearing a package and a single folded letter addressed to Mr. Jackson Carter, Willow Creek Ranch, Arizona Territory. He recognized the flowing handwriting from Eliza's earlier advertisement. With a mixture of excitement and dread, he tore open the letter in the privacy of his barn. Inside, she wrote of her modest upbringing, her desire to start anew, and an inkling of hope that the West held promise for a woman who had been left penniless. She did not mention children at the time. She ended with a cautious tone, stating, "If our hearts be of like mind, I pray we find joy together." For days, Jackson wrestled with the idea. Was he betraying Clara's memory? Or was he honoring her by moving forward? At night, he could almost imagine Clara standing in the corner of the bedroom, urging him to try again, to let hope blossom in the barren fields of his soul. Finally, he decided to answer Eliza's letter. He wrote of his ranch, describing the dusty plains where cacti bloomed in spring, and thunderheads rolled across big skies. He admitted his heartbreak, hoping honesty might be the best foundation for something new. Jackson's hand trembled as he pressed the pen to paper, signing. "Sincerely yours, Jackson Carter." As the correspondence continued, Jackson discovered Eliza was set to arrive by stagecoach in mid-August all the way from Cincinnati. The arrangement carried a sense of finality. If they found each other agreeable, they would marry soon, perhaps within days. But fate, that fickle mistress of the frontier, had different plans. The stagecoach that carried Eliza Thompson did not arrive on schedule. Days turned into nights, and the rumor mill in Willow Creek churned. Some said bandits had attacked travelers on the main road. Others whispered of a broken axle, leaving passengers stranded at a relay station. The local marshal, Henry Caldwell, urged patience, but Jackson's anxiety mounted with each passing hour. He checked the telegraph office daily, hoping for news, yet none came. Then, under the full moon of a sweltering August night, Jackson woke to the frantic barking of his dog Buddy. The noise led him to the barn. There, in the darkness, he found a woman trembling beneath the rafters, clutching a pair of terrified twin children. Her dress was torn, her face streaked with dust and tears. When Jackson struck a match to light the lantern, he nearly dropped it in shock. It was Eliza Thompson, disheveled, frightened, and undeniably real. Eliza and her twins were huddled in the far corner, trying to hide beneath a mound of old horse blankets. The little ones, a boy and a girl, no older than 4, stared at Jackson with wide, tear-filled eyes. Eliza's gaze held both relief and apprehension. She recognized Jackson from the tintype photo he had once sent in a letter, but the circumstances were far from what either had imagined. She whispered hoarsely, "I had no choice but to come here." The stagecoach it was, held up by bandits just past the Painted Gorge. "We managed to escape on foot, wandering through the desert. I prayed we would find Willow Creek before nightfall." Eliza confessed she had never mentioned her twins, Lily and Luke, in the letters because she feared rejection. She was a widow herself, left penniless when her first husband died. The children were all she had in the world, that she had hoped to reveal their existence only once she felt secure in her new home. Jackson knelt beside them, offering water and what reassurance he could. He couldn't deny feeling blindsided, but neither could he ignore their desperation. Something inside him, a compassion shaped by his own sorrow, tugged at his heart. Without a second thought, he offered them shelter and set about making the barn a safer place for the night. The glow of the lantern revealed the bruises on Eliza's arms, likely from the rough journey. Her children still trembled, exhausted from fear and thirst. Jackson's mind reeled. He had expected to greet a mail-order bride at the stage depot in daylight, not discover a fugitive mother in his barn. The betrayal gnawed at him. She had hidden the truth of her twins. Yet how could he hold that against her, given the terror she must have faced? In that moment, Jackson realized just how close to death Eliza and the children might have come. The Painted Gorge was notorious for outlaws, desperate men who ambushed stagecoaches for gold or anything of value. If Eliza had managed to flee, that meant the bandits were likely still at large, prowling the desert. A surge of protective instinct washed over him. Still kneeling, Jackson reached for the canteen. "Eliza," he said gently, "I wish you had told me about Lily and Luke, but that can wait. First, we need to get you safe." Eliza's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. She nodded, pressing her lips together to stifle a sob. Jackson guided her to her feet, careful not to startle the children. He led them to the ranch house, where he allowed Eliza to bathe, while he prepared a small cot for the twins beside the fireplace. The tension in the air crackled like static, each of them uncertain what dawn might bring. As Eliza and the twins slept, Jackson remained awake, leaning against the front window and peering out at the moonlit yard. Buddy dozed at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to sniff the still air. 1,000 thoughts collided in Jackson's mind. He had expected some drama, some adjustments in bringing a mail-order bride from so far away, but nothing like this. Bandits on the loose, hidden children, and a terrified woman who might have led danger right to his doorstep. His eyes wandered to Clara's old rocking chair in the corner. He could almost hear her voice urging him to open his heart. He wondered if she'd approve of the desperate mother sleeping in the guest bedroom. A sense of duty and something else he wasn't quite ready to name propelled him forward. He decided that come morning he would ride into Willow Creek to speak with Marshal Henry Caldwell, but the hours before dawn dragged on. The desert nights were notorious for carrying sound. Jackson thought he heard hoofbeats echoing across the flats at one point, but when he ran outside, the silence mocked him. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be out there tracking Eliza's footprints through the sand. Worry gnawed at his gut until the first orange glow of sunrise touched the horizon. At sunrise, Jackson prepared a simple breakfast of biscuits, bacon, and strong coffee. The twins ate ravenously, eyes wide with curiosity, as they glanced around the tidy kitchen. Eliza appeared calmer after a few hours of rest, though a faint bruise on her cheek reminded Jackson of the violence she had escaped. She spoke in a hushed voice, revealing bits of her story. Her first husband had died in a factory accident, leaving her saddled with medical debts she couldn't repay. Faced with eviction, she sold everything to journey west, hoping a new life might await her and her children. It was only upon arriving in the territory that she realized how perilous the roads could be. Jackson listened intently, saying little at first. Sympathy warred with unease. He had not counted on raising a ready-made family. Yet as Lily and Luke shyly offered him a smile, he felt an unexpected warmth flicker in his chest. Once they finished eating, Jackson insisted that Eliza and the children remain indoors for their safety. He saddled his horse and rode into Willow Creek, determined to alert Marshal Caldwell of the bandits. He also needed advice. Marrying a mail-order bride was supposed to be complicated enough without gunmen lurking in the brush. If trouble was following Eliza, it might threaten the entire town. He refused to let that happen. Willow Creek was already stirring by the time Jackson arrived. Wagons rattled along the main street, and townspeople went about their daily business with practiced stoicism. Jackson dismounted in front of the marshal's office, a small wooden building bearing a star-shaped sign above the door. Inside, Marshal Henry Caldwell sat behind a cluttered desk, sorting through wanted posters. Tall and broad-shouldered, Caldwell had a deep scar above his left eye, courtesy of a shootout with a stagecoach robber years ago. He greeted Jackson with a nod, but raised an eyebrow when Jackson explained the situation. "Bandits," Caldwell muttered, stroking his mustache. "They've been more active lately, but we haven't pinned down who's behind these attacks. We heard rumors of a gang led by Travis McAllister, a real mean cuss. If they've got Eliza in their sights, you can bet they'll try to track her down, especially if they think she has something valuable." Jackson explained that Eliza had nothing but a battered suitcase and her 2 children. Caldwell shrugged. "Those scoundrels might have thought the stagecoach was carrying a strongbox. Who knows? But if they're still out there, you need to be careful. Keep her at your place and lock your doors at night. I'll send a deputy to patrol the area." Before Jackson left, Caldwell leveled him with a serious gaze. "You sure you want this trouble, Jackson? A mail-order bride and her twins sounds complicated even without bandits. If you're not fully committed, best you send her to Phoenix or Tucson somewhere with lawmen on every corner." Jackson paused, considering. Then he tipped his hat and walked out, aware he had silently made his decision the moment he found Eliza in his barn. As Jackson left the marshal's office, he noticed curious glances from a few townsfolk. Widow Parker, the local seamstress, paused to talk with Anna Whitley, the telegraph operator. They watched Jackson with knowing looks, whispering behind gloved hands. Word traveled fast in small towns, and the story of Jackson Carter's mail-order bride would surely be the day's biggest gossip. Rather than confront them, Jackson decided to purchase a few supplies. He needed flour, canned goods, extra blankets, anything that might help Eliza and Tay twins settle in. He also visited the local blacksmith, Old Man Barnes, to see if he could fortify the ranch's doors and windows. The cost would be steep, but with bandits prowling the outskirts, Jackson felt the expense was justified. On his way back to the ranch, loaded down with provisions, Jackson passed Reverend Jonah Miller. The Reverend offered a friendly wave, but also a concerned frown when Jackson mentioned the trouble. "I heard the stage was robbed," Reverend Miller said. "We've been praying for any survivors. Is the young woman truly in your care?" Jackson nodded. "She is, and I might need your services before long." The Reverend raised an eyebrow in understanding. He knew Jackson was hinting at a marriage ceremony. But in such times of uncertainty, who could say whether a wedding would be a cause for celebration or another spark to inflame a dangerous situation? Back at the ranch, Eliza and the twins appeared more rested. The children were playing quietly with a couple of carved wooden animals Jackson had made years ago for no particular reason, a hobby to keep his hands busy. Now seeing Lily and Luke giggle as they clacked the figures together brought a small smile to Jackson's lips. Eliza, however, carried a palpable tension. Her shoulders remained stiff, and she occasionally glanced out the window as though expecting danger to materialize at any moment. She thanked Jackson for his kindness, insisting she would find a way to repay him. Jackson cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Eliza, I went to see Marshal Caldwell. He's sending a deputy to keep watch, but we should be prepared for trouble just in case." The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "If it's too much to ask, Jackson, I can go," he cut her off gently. "We made an arrangement through our letters, and I'm not the kind of man who abandons his word. You and your children deserve safety." He paused, wrestling with his next words. "Listen, I know we planned to meet properly court for a bit, then decide if marriage was right. But given the circumstances, we might need to move faster." Eliza nodded, understanding flickering across her features. She seemed relieved and terrified in the same breath. The notion of marrying a stranger, albeit one who had shown kindness, still hung heavily in the air. Yet in the lawless frontier, sometimes the vow of matrimony provided one of the few secure shelters a person could find legally, morally, and socially. Nightfall arrived swiftly, casting deep shadows across the ranch. After supper, Jackson sat by the fireplace, while Eliza tucked the twins into makeshift beds on the living room floor. The house felt warmer, somehow filled with the soft murmur of bedtime lullabies and the rustle of children's blankets. For a fleeting moment, Jackson could almost believe this was how his life was always meant to be, alive with the gentle chaos of family. But as soon as the twins drifted off, the weight of reality returned. Jackson and Eliza exchanged uneasy glances. Neither knew what to say. The swirl of their unspoken questions filled the silence. Finally, Eliza settled into the rocking chair, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry for not telling you about Lily and Luke in my letters," she whispered. "I've been turned away by so many who couldn't bear the thought of taking on children that weren't their own. I felt this might be my last chance. But that's no excuse. I should have told you." Jackson let out a long breath. "I won't lie, finding you in the barn that way was a shock. But I understand why you did it. We all do things out of desperation." They fell silent again, the crackle of embers in the fireplace filling the void. Jackson could almost sense Clara's presence, urging him to take a chance on this broken family. But guilt knotted his stomach. Could he love another woman without betraying his memories of Clara? Or was his desire to protect Eliza born of loneliness, some longing for what he'd lost? Around midnight, Buddy's barking shattered the stillness. Jackson grabbed his rifle from above the mantel and rushed outside. Eliza hovered in the doorway, her eyes wide as she peered into the darkness. Tay moon cast an eerie glow on the yard, illuminating a lone figure on horseback near to pasture fence. "Who goes there?" Jackson shouted. The figure tensed and spurred his horse forward. Jackson fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing across the plains. The rider wheeled around and galloped away, disappearing into the moonlit desert. Jackson's heart pounded each beat, resonating like an alarm bell. Eliza clutched the doorframe, terror etched across her face. "They found me," she whispered. "It has to be one of those bandits." Jackson shook his head, adrenaline surging. "Or someone working for them. We'll keep watch, and come sunrise, I'll speak with the marshal again. Tonight, no one sleeps." Eliza ushered the children back into the house, their frightened whimpers muffled under blankets. For the remainder of the night, Jackson stood guard. With every gust of wind, he expected an ambush, but the desert remained silent, save for the soft trill of nocturnal insects and the occasional rustle of a distant tumbleweed. Morning arrived without further incident, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Jackson saddled his horse, prepared to return to town. Eliza wanted to come to speak with the marshal herself, but Jackson insisted she remain hidden. "No point parading you around if outlaws are looking for you," he reasoned. "Better to stay safe." On his way, he stopped by the Whitley Telegraph office to send a message to his sister, Evelyn Carter, in Dry Gulch. He asked her to visit as soon as she could, explaining only that urgent matters required her presence. He also inquired if she knew of any traveling preachers or judges who could officiate a quick wedding. The exchange of telegrams was short, but Anna Whitley gave him a knowing grin. Gossip traveled quickly indeed. Marshal Caldwell was none too surprised to hear about the midnight intruder. "I'll send Deputy Ruiz to stand guard tonight," he promised. "But these men might not back down easily. If they suspect Eliza witnessed something or took something from that stagecoach, they won't stop until they find her." Jackson frowned. She didn't mention taking anything, only that she ran for her life. Caldwell shrugged. Sometimes outlaws believed what they wanted to believe. Before Jackson left, Caldwell eyed him cautiously. "You be careful, Carter. If you're set on marrying that girl, make sure you're ready for all that comes with it." Outside, Jackson happened upon Gregory Winston, a friend from the local bank. Gregory had a calm demeanor and a knack for dispensing grounded advice. When Jackson confided in him, Winston said, "There's no shame in forging a family however you can. But do it for the right reasons. Love, hope not just fear." After returning to the ranch, Jackson found Eliza quietly braiding Lily's hair while Luke played WTIH, the carved animals on the floor. The domestic scene tugged at his heartstrings in ways he hadn't expected. He set down his hat and cleared his throat. "Eliza, we need to talk." She looked up, eyes brimming with questions. Jackson took a seat across from her and spoke in a level tone. "Marshal Caldwell thinks these bandits won't quit. They might believe you saw something valuable or that you're carrying something from that stagecoach. Whatever their reason, they want to find you." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I talked to the marshal about our situation. If we If we decide to marry, it might offer you and the twins a measure of legal protection. The town will rally behind a local family more readily than a stranger." Eliza's cheeks reddened, but she met his gaze. "And you, Jackson, is that your only reason I don't want to trap you in something just because you feel obligated?" He took her hand gently. "Eliza, I won't pretend this is some fairy tale romance. We barely know each other. But I feel responsible for your safety. And maybe, just maybe, I'm ready to open my heart again." He exhaled slowly. "There's a preacher in Willow Creek, Reverend Miller. He can marry us quietly, even before dawn, if we wish." Her eyes welled with tears. She glanced at her children, then back at Jackson. A faint smile trembled on her lips as she whispered, "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Preparations for a hurried wedding began at once. The tension in the ranch house was thick-layered with a strange blend of trepidation and subdued excitement. Eliza mended her dress as best she could, trying to brush out the dust and fix the torn hem. Jackson polished his boots and found a clean shirt, simple gestures that suddenly carried enormous weight. Yet the threat outside loomed ever larger. Several times Jackson thought he heard the distant rumble of horses. Once, while gathering wildflowers by the fence line, he spotted a dust cloud far off, vanishing behind a cluster of rocks. He felt certain the bandits were watching. As sunset approached, Deputy Ruiz arrived armed with a rifle and a six-shooter. He nodded in greeting, then stationed himself near the barn, scanning the plains. "If they come, they'll come under cover of darkness," he muttered, tipping his hat. "I've got fresh eyes for them." Inside, Eliza tried to steady her nerves. Lily and Luke were excited at the prospect of a party, though they barely understood the gravity of the situation. Eliza combed Lily's hair, braiding it carefully, while Luke clung to her skirts. She glanced at Jackson across the room, her gaze full of gratitude and fear. Neither spoke, but they knew the night would change everything. Just after dusk, a horse-drawn buggy rumbled up the road. Jackson tensed, rifle in hand, until he recognized the figure at the reins. It was his sister, Evelyn Carter, who had come all the way from Dry Gulch in response to his telegram. She was a spirited woman, older than Jackson by 2 years, with a sharp tongue and a heart of gold. Evelyn jumped down from the buggy, her face flushed with concern. "Jackson, what in tarnation have you gotten yourself into?" she demanded, hurrying forward. "Marrying some stranger, and bandits too. You always did know how to stir up trouble." Before Jackson could answer, Evelyn spotted Eliza and the twins standing on the porch. Her demeanor softened immediately. "Oh my word, you poor dears. Come here, let me look at you," she said, ushering them inside. Over a hastily prepared supper, Jackson explained the entire saga: the letters, the stagecoach, robbery, finding Eliza in the barn, and his plan to marry her before dawn. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, but said nothing disparaging. Instead, she offered Eliza a hug. "Child, you've been through the ringer, but if Jackson believes in you, I do too." Eliza's shoulders relaxed. She had expected to face judgment, or at least suspicion, form Jackson's only living kin. Instead, she found acceptance. Whatever else happened, that small mercy was a blessing. As the clock crept toward midnight, Jackson and Eliza prepared for the short ride into Intertown, where Reverend Miller had agreed to conduct a discreet ceremony under the flicker of lantern light. Deputy Ruiz insisted on accompanying them for protection. Evelyn would stay behind, with Lily and Luke barricading the ranch house if necessary. The tension ratcheted higher each minute, bringing them closer to a critical turning point. The desert night was eerily quiet as they set out in Jackson's wagon. A sliver of moon illuminated the rolling plains, casting long shadows that played tricks on their eyes. Deputy Ruiz rode alongside rifle at the ready, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. Every few moments Jackson glanced at Eliza, who clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers in trembling hands. He recognized the fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of resolve. "Just a bit farther," he said softly, guiding the horse down the dusty road. But no sooner had he spoken than a gunshot pierced the silence. The shot whizzed past, missing them by inches. Deputy Ruiz yelled for them to take cover, spurring his horse behind a rocky outcropping. Jackson lashed the reins, pushing the wagon to move faster, adrenaline surging through his veins. Another shot rang out, this time hitting the wagon's sideboard. Eliza let out a gasp. Jackson spotted at least 2 figures on horseback in the distance, muzzle flashes betraying their positions. The bandits had indeed been watching. Jackson guided the wagon in a zigzag pattern, trying to make them a harder target. Ruiz returned fire, each shot echoing through the canyon-like darkness. For a terrifying moment, Jackson feared they would be overwhelmed, the wedding plan unraveling under the violence of the night. But fate had other ideas. An unexpected gust of wind kicked up a cloud of dust, formed the dry riverbed, obscuring them from the bandits' line of sight. With the cover, Jackson urged the horse forward, heart pounding. They careened over the rough terrain until the attackers were little more than shadowy silhouettes behind them. Deputy Ruiz, still guarding the rear, motioned for them to keep moving. The adrenaline rush left Jackson's hands trembling on the reins, but he pressed on. Eliza clung to his arm, her face pale but determined. The wagon rattled fiercely, threatening to spill them at every bump and turn. Yet soon, the flickering lights of Willow Creek came into view, a beacon of safety in the hostile dark. When they arrived outside the small church, Ruiz circled once more, scanning for any sign of pursuers. Satisfied they weren't followed, he dismounted and helped Eliza down from the wagon. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she held her chin high, refusing to let fear consume her. Jackson placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, and together they stepped inside. Reverend Jonah Miller stood waiting beneath the warm glow of lanterns. The church was a humble wooden structure with a simple altar and rows of handmade pews. Tonight, there were no guests, just Jackson, Eliza, the Reverend, and Deputy Ruiz standing guard near the door. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering with each gust of wind that snuck through the cracks in the wooden boards. Eliza's dress was still dusty and torn at the hem, but she did her best to smooth it. Jackson, in his clean shirt and polished boots, tried to stifle the shaking in his limbs. The ordeal of the ambush weighed heavily on both of them, yet beneath that weight lived a quiet sense of resolve. Reverend Miller nodded solemnly, sensing the gravity of the moment. He opened his Bible and began the brief ceremony. "We gather here," he intoned softly, "on this night of great peril and hope to unite Jackson Carter and Eliza Thompson in holy matrimony. In this frontier land, we are reminded daily that life is fragile. May these vows forge a bond that endures beyond fear and uncertainty." They exchanged simple rings, hastily purchased from the local mercantile that very afternoon. Their words were few, but heartfelt, a promise to stand by each other, to share in each other's burdens and joys, to protect and care for one another, and the children who depended on them. Reverend Miller smiled kindly, closing his Bible. "By the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Let no man tear asunder what God has joined this night. In the quiet hush that followed, Jackson and Eliza shared their first kiss, shy, gentle-born, not from a grand romance, but from mutual compassion and the fragile beginnings of trust. They left the church with an official marriage certificate, stepping into the late-night chill as newlyweds. The weight of that title, husband and wife, settled over them, mingling with relief and trepidation. Outside, Deputy Ruiz handed Jackson his rifle back and gave a curt nod of congratulations. "We should move quickly," Ruiz said. "There's no guarantee those bandits won't try again." Jackson agreed, glancing anxiously at the moonlit street. Willow Creek's buildings stood silent and dark, their occupants fast asleep. Only the distant glow of lanterns in the saloon hinted at life. Even so, a creeping sense of being watched tugged at Jackson's nerves. They took the wagon down a back road this time, hoping to avoid another ambush. Eliza pressed against Jackson, her hand clutching his arm. The reality of their marriage was overshadowed by the fear coursing through them. Each snap of a twig or rustle of a nearby bush made them jolt. But the night passed without further incident. They reached the ranch just before the first light of dawn streaked the sky with purple and gold. Evelyn opened the door, a questioning look on her face. Relief flooded her features when she saw the marriage certificate. She hugged Eliza first, then Jackson, tears of joy and worry mixing on her cheeks. In the background, Lily and Luke peeked out from behind a doorway. Sensing something momentous had happened, they ran to their mother, wrapping themselves around her legs. Jackson knelt down to their eye level, uncertain how to behave as their new stepfather. A wave of protectiveness washed over him. He gently placed a hand on each twin's shoulder, saying quietly, "Welcome home." As dawn broke over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jackson and Eliza realized just how much their lives had changed in a few short hours. They were husband and wife now, with 2 small children depending on them, and a gang of outlaws lurking somewhere in the desert. The wedding might have offered them some protection in the eyes of the law and the townsfolk, but it did little to soothe the gnawing sense of danger. Still, they tried to establish a semblance of normalcy. Eliza fed the twins breakfast, while Jackson tended to the horses. Evelyn busied herself by cleaning the house and organizing the meager wedding gifts Jackson and Eliza had exchanged, small tokens of commitment purchased on a whim. Throughout the day, the ranch felt more alive than it had in years. The warmth of family, however new and fragile, replaced the lonely echo that once haunted its halls. But every passing hour, Jackson caught himself scanning the horizon, looking for dust clouds that might herald another attack. Deputy Ruiz came by in the late afternoon, checking in on their safety. He found no trace of the bandits nearby, but that didn't mean they disappeared. Before he left, Ruiz tipped his hat. "Congratulations on the wedding, folks. If you see anything suspicious, send someone to town right away." Then he turned his horse and rode off, leaving Jackson WT a deep unease. Late that evening, after Evelyn had retired to the guest room and the twins were asleep, Jackson joined Eliza by the flickering light of an oil lamp in the living room. An unspoken question had been lingering between them. Why were the bandits so determined to chase her, sensing his unease? Eliza folded her hands in her lap. "You should know something," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "The night the stagecoach was attacked, I saw more than I told the marshal." Jackson leaned forward. "What did you see?" Eliza explained that one of the bandits had taken a small lockbox from a passenger, a traveling salesman heading to Tucson. He resisted, and in the struggle the box fell open, spilling official documents across the ground. Eliza had seen the bandits snatch them up, but not before she glimpsed a letter bearing the seal of a federal courthouse in Phoenix. She thought little of it at the time, panicked as the violence unfolded. But after she fled, she realized those documents might be extremely valuable or incriminating. Perhaps the bandits believed she'd picked up a paper in the chaos. Jackson ran a hand over his face. "They think you might have evidence that could land them in prison," he surmised. "So they won't rest until they find out if you have it." Eliza nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't have anything. But how do I prove that to men who shoot first and ask questions later?" Jackson reached out, squeezing her hand. "We'll figure this out together. We're a family now, Eliza." In the week that followed, tension built to a breaking point. Jackson and Evelyn fortified the ranch with Deputy Ruiz's help, erecting barricades and stationing watchers at night. The townsfolk, growing wary of outlaws so close, pitched in where they could. Even so, the bandits remained elusive. Sometimes Jackson thought he saw shadows on the horizon, riders scoping out the ranch, but they never attacked. The children, blissfully unaware of the danger, played in the yard under Evelyn's watchful eye. Eliza tried her best to settle into her new role, cooking hearty meals, mending clothes, and making the ranch house feel more like a home than Jackson had ever known it. In these quiet moments, genuine affection began to bloom between the newlyweds, but the cloud of threat refused to lift. One afternoon, Jackson received word from Gregory Winston at the bank that suspicious men were asking questions about Eliza in town. Marshal Caldwell vowed to apprehend them if they reappeared, but the outlaws were cunning. They slipped in and out of Willow Creek like phantoms, leaving behind a trail of rumors. Finally, the confrontation came one stormy night. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the plains like midday flashes. Thunder rumbled deep in the distance. In the midst of the howling wind, Jackson heard horses, lots of them, surrounding the ranch. He blew out the lanterns, signaled Evelyn and Eliza to gather the children and hide, then took position at the window with his rifle. A harsh voice called out from the darkness, "We know you're in there. Miss Thompson, hand over them documents, or we'll burn this place to the ground." Deputy Ruiz, anticipating such a strike, was already on the property. He and Jackson exchanged a tense nod. The deputy whispered, "I'll flank them, form the barn. Cover me." With that, he slipped out into the torrent of rain. Jackson fired a warning shot into air. "We have law on our side," he shouted back. "Back off, gunfire," answered bullets, splintering the wooden walls of the ranch house. Inside, Eliza and Evelyn huddled with Lily and Luke, trying to keep their children calm. The twins clung to their mother, their faces pale with terror. Eliza closed her eyes, praying for salvation. Outside, the bandits circled, firing sporadically. Thunder boomed, drowning out some of the noise. Jackson returned fire, each shot measured. He spotted at least 5 armed men through the lightning flashes, their horses bucking nervously under the storm's onslaught. Somewhere in the fray, Ruiz fired his weapon. One bandit tumbled from his horse with a cry, sending the others into a frenzy. 2 tried to break for the barn, presumably to flush out Ruiz. Jackson saw his chance. He aimed carefully and squeezed the trigger. His rifle cracked, and one of the bandits toppled onto the muddy ground. In the living room, glass shattered as a stray bullet pierced the window. Eliza shielded the children with her body, choking back sobs of fear. Evelyn steadied her own revolver, ready to protect them if the attackers forced their way inside. Just when it seemed the onslaught might never end, the distant roar of more horses echoed through the storm. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness, Marshal Caldwell and a posse galloping hard. The arrival of reinforcements threw the bandits into disarray. Some turned to flee, others fought on stubbornly. With renewed vigor, Jackson and Ruiz pressed their advantage, coordinating shots to drive the attackers away, form the house. Caldwell's men joined the fray, cornering two bandits behind a cluster of boulders. A brief gun battle ended when the outlaws surrendered, dropping their weapons in the mud. Another pair tried to escape toward the desert, but the posse pursued gunfire, echoing until only silence and rain remained. Jackson rushed inside to check on Eliza Evelyn and the children. He found them shaken but unhurt. Eliza clung to him, tears mingling with the rain, dripping from his hat brim. "It's over, Jackson," she whispered, voice trembling. "Tell me it's over." He kissed her forehead gently, unable to promise such a thing. Marshal Caldwell entered, soaked to the bone, but relieved. "We've captured a few of them," he said, including Travis McAllister himself. "Looks like their little gang is finished." In the aftermath, the lawmen scoured the property, rounding up wounded bandits and confiscating their weapons. One of the captured outlaws confessed that they truly believed Eliza had picked up legal documents that could link them to a string of robberies and murders. With McAllister in custody, the threat dissipated, leaving Jackson and Eliza to face a new dawn with battered hearts and an unbreakable bond. A few days later, the storm clouds parted, giving way to a radiant sunrise. The air smelled fresh, the desert blooming with wildflowers nourished by the rainfall. Life returned to its usual pace in Willow Creek, though talk of the raid on Jackson Carter's ranch remained on everyone's lips. Marshal Caldwell assured them, taught with McAllister's capture, the gang was effectively dismantled. The travelers on the stagecoach routes could rest a bit easier. Jackson and Eliza, meanwhile, began to rebuild, patching the bullet holes in the ranch house, clearing away the debris of battle. Evelyn decided to stay for a while longer, helping her brother and new sister-in-law adjust. The children, Lily and Luke, returned to playing in the yard, their giggles echoing against the hills. Their resilience amazed Jackson, who found himself growing more attached to them each day. In rare moments of quiet, he would scoop them up in his arms, twirl them around, and laugh for the first time in years. Eliza, for her part, found a peace she'd never known. Though she carried scars from the ordeal, she took comfort in Jackson's steady presence. A gentle affection bloomed between them, born of shared hardship and a commitment to forging a family against all odds. As the weeks passed, that gentle affection deepened into something stronger. Late at night, after tucking Lily and Luke into bed, Jackson and Eliza sat by the fireplace, sharing stories of their lives before fate brought them together. She told him about her childhood in Cincinnati, the hardships of losing her husband, and the desperation that drove her west. He spoke of Clara, the love he had lost, and how her memory had once made him believe he could never open his heart again. "We may not have done things in the usual order," Eliza said one evening, smiling shyly. "Married first, then fell in love. But I think Clara would understand." Jackson squeezed her hand, gratitude welling in his chest. "She would," he agreed softly. He realized for the first time that the sharp ache of losing Clara was fading, replaced by a gentle warmth, and the knowledge that love could come twice in a lifetime, even under the strangest circumstances. Outside, the crickets chirped, and the vast desert sky shimmered with countless stars. It was a far cry from the chaos of that night, when bandits lurked among the shadows, thirsting for blood. Now the only silhouettes on the horizon were moonlit cacti and a lone owl perched on the fence post. Willow Creek, once skeptical of Eliza's sudden arrival, opened its arms to the newly formed Carter family. The local women's guild invited Eliza to tea, eager to hear her harrowing tale. Widow Parker offered her services to sew proper dresses for the twins. Even Anna Whitley, the telegraph operator, set aside her usual snide remarks and offered genuine congratulations. Reverend Miller officially blessed their union in Sunday service, calling their story a testament to faith and perseverance. He insisted they come to the front, where the congregation cheered them on, proud to see a family rescued form the jaws of danger. In the midst of this newfound acceptance, Jackson and Eliza discovered they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. The ranch turned a small profit that year, thanks in part to a record-breaking harvest. Lily and Luke settled into a daily routine, learning chores suitable for their age and reading lessons from their mother. Evelyn, satisfied that her brother was in good hands, eventually returned to Dry Gulch, promising to visit often. Months after the fateful night in the barn, the Carters faced a new twist, this time a joyous one. Eliza noticed the telltale signs before Jackson did. The sudden waves of nausea in the morning, her growing fatigue. One afternoon, she called him into the kitchen, tears pooling in her eyes. "Jackson," she whispered, voice trembling with both excitement and fear, "we're going to have a baby." For a moment, he stood speechless, heart pounding like a stampede. Then a wide grin spread across his face, and he pulled Eliza into a tender embrace. The children, overhearing, cheered, though they only half understood what was happening. A new life conceived in the aftermath of terror and sealed by a love that had blossomed in adversity would soon join their family. They shared the news with Evelyn by telegram and received a reply filled with exclamation points and promises to come help in any way she could. The congregation at Willow Creek Church celebrated the announcement with potluck dinners and an outpouring of good wishes. Gone were the whispers of scandal or skepticism. In their place stood unwavering support. The desert sun cast a warm glow over the Carter Ranch, its golden rays slipping across the porch, where Jackson rocked gently with a baby nestled in one arm and a steaming mug of coffee in the other. Eliza, dozing beside him in the rocking chair, cradled their newborn daughter in her arms. Clara, named after the woman who had once held his heart and now, in name, lived on in the legacy of love reborn. Inside Reborn. Inside, Lily and Luke played a game of checkers on the parlor rug, their laughter ringing through the wooden walls that had once echoed with loneliness. Now, those same walls pulsed with life meals, cooked with care, lullabies whispered into the twilight, and the quiet rustle of baby blankets as Clara stirred in her mother's arms. Nearly a year had passed since Eliza had stumbled into his barn with her twins, fleeing bandits and the wreckage of her past. In that short time, their world had transformed. From a family forged under fire and fear, they had emerged stronger, woven together by a hardship trust and a love that had not blossomed quickly but had sunk roots deep into the dusty Arizona soil. Jackson often thought back to the night of the siege, the thunder that rolled across the plains, the bullets that cracked through the night, and the cry of the children muffled under trembling arms. But more than the fear, he remembered Eliza's unwavering courage, Evelyn's fierce protection, and the way the townsfolk rallied around them. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. Every corner of the ranch, bore the marks of change. The walls had been patched and repainted, the flower beds Evelyn had planted now bloomed tich-color, and the once silent barn now held the soft whinnies of ponies Lily and Luke helped tend. Even the neighbors who once gossiped about Jackson's desperate mail-order marriage now tipped their hats in respect when he rode into town, his daughter wrapped against his chest and his wife smiling at his side. Yet in quiet moments, Jackson still felt Clara's presence, not as a shadow of sorrow, but as a whisper of peace. He believed she would have approved of Eliza, of the second chance he dared to embrace. Naming their daughter after her hadn't been easy, but it felt right, a bridge between the past he cherished and the future he was now building. As the wind stirred the chimes hanging from the porch beam, Jackson glanced down at baby Clara, her tiny fingers curled around his thumb. He looked over at Eliza, whose eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a sleepy smile full of warmth and promise. They had been strangers, once brought together by desperation. Now they were a family bound not by blood, but by the unshakable vow to protect, to love, and to keep going no matter the storms that might still come. And beneath that vast western sky, as dawn stretched its golden fingers across the land, Jackson Carter finally understood this right here was what legacy truly meant. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, romance, and redemption in the Wild West. Jackson's pledge to protect Eliza, her twins, and the newborn baby Clara became a powerful reminder that no matter how harsh life on the frontier can be, there is always room for hope, unity, and the promise of a brighter dawn. If this story swept you away to a time of dusty trails, stormy nights, and unwavering devotion, then don't let the adventure end here. Hit the like button to show your support for stories of frontier bravery. Share this video so others can discover the heart-pounding twists and heartwarming triumph in Jackson and Eliza's tale. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. Until next time, keep the Wild West alive in your heart.